Since 2003, this is The Sports Source with your host, John Pennington.
The Sports Source is presented by Junk Be Gone, Pipe Wrench, and the Garza Law Firm.
The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Junk Be Gone studios for today's edition of the Sports Source. We got a bunch of people in here who aren't in our normal football panel. This is the open date, so it's a chance for me to bring in the folks who disappear during this time of year. You can only catch them on our Saturday show. We've got a lot to cover. Tennessee didn't play yesterday, but they're probably going to move up to number 4 in the national polls as a result of what went on yesterday. We'll talk about recruiting. We'll talk about the Vols' remaining 8 games. We'll talk about, is the O-line good enough to get them to the playoff? Has the defense, I keep saying this every week, has the defense been tested yet? I say, yes, they have. Then I watch the team they just played, and it's like, oh, maybe they haven't. We'll get into all that today. Full show for you, 90 minutes of Vols talk coming at you. First segment, brought to you by our friends at Junk Be Gone, folks. Have you got something so big and so old that you need to get rid of it, but you need help doing it? Junk Be Gone actually does small demolition work. Barns, sheds, porches, even mobile homes. Call Junk Be Gone this week. Have them tear down your mess and then haul it away for you. junkbegone.biz. All right, let's welcome in the first group of panelists. We have one more person waiting in the wings that we're happy to have here, but I'm also happy to have these folks. Vince Ferrara right there, Will West right here, Ryan Callahan, Paige Dower. Thanks to you all, and if you're wondering, who are these people? Just check the little graphic under them. It'll tell you who they are. All right, because we don't have time. We're too jam-packed. 4-0 Tennessee was off yesterday, but there were 6 other games involving SEC teams. We can put that up. There we go. Texas, Mississippi State hung with them a little longer than I thought they would. Then the nightcap last night was unreal. For those who didn't get a chance to see it, it looked like it was just going to be a blowout. Alabama was up, 28-0 at one point and 30-3 at the half. And then Georgia comes back, takes the lead for one play. And then Alabama comes back with a bomb to win the thing. Wow, the genius, Lane Kiffin, plays one good team this year and already falls in his face. There's a shocker. Kentucky beats Ole Miss. And then we got LSU whipping up on South Alabama. Oklahoma goes down to Auburn. And they had to have a fourth-quarter comeback. And with their offense, I wouldn't have pictured it. So it's a good thing the defense got it done for them, even scoring for them. And then Texas A&M beats Tennessee's next opponent, Arkansas. Okay, Ryan, I'll start with you. What did we learn? We're just going to talk a little SEC. Tennessee didn't play, so let's catch up on what's going on. What have we learned from the SEC yesterday?
Let's start with the headliners. I think we learned that Georgia and Alabama are the class of the SEC until further notice, and that hasn't changed, despite people assuming that Alabama might take a half step back. Boy, they have not. So I think we're reminded how much talent is still on that roster. Jalen Milroe looks better than he did last year. We'll see if that continues in the long run. He can be a little up and down, but Georgia and Alabama look awfully good, and that looked like 2 potential national championship teams, or at least teams that have a real shot at winning one, playing head-to-head last night. So I start with that because that's always a little bit of a downer if you're a Tennessee fan and you see those 2 teams playing that well.
I think everybody had a hope that Alabama might drop off this year, but there's an awful lot of talent there. Paige, what did you learn yesterday?
Yeah, kind of the same thing that you were saying. I even think if you kind of switch gears too and you go over to the Texas game, I think Arch Manning continues to look very elite, very legit. That offense really kind of finding its rhythm. Texas A&M, they looked pretty good against Arkansas's, offensive line. But again, I just think the SEC is just giving us quality, entertaining games, especially if you could be like a third party watching the game. Even Oklahoma and Auburn had some flashes too.
What did we learn, guys?
Kalen DeBoer is good. He is really good, and there is no drop-off. This is what happens when you give one of these elite offensive minds the kind of talent that Nick Saban can bring into a program. It's incredible when you see what Alabama was capable of doing. Now, at the same time, he's got to learn a lesson. This isn't the Pac-12. Don't let your foot off the gas and start working on things and go vanilla against Georgia.
Yeah, if you're going against Oklahoma, who's got no offense, like Josh Heupel did, that makes sense to me.
It does. It does.
Against Georgia, that's a little risky.
You stop disguising blitzes. You stop blitzing. You start working on different offensive sets instead of just keeping your foot on the gas and going tempo and crushing them. He has to learn that lesson. Maybe he did last night. The other thing is, maybe right now in the SEC, because of the transfer portal, this is going to look a little bit like the early part of the NFL season, where we could see a team that has not gelled yet. They brought in transfer players like Kentucky, And sometimes week 1 through 3 in the NFL, you can't really tell who's good and who isn't. Don't overreact to that.
Right.
We might have to say that in the SEC because Kentucky looked like they can't block against South Carolina. They wouldn't throw the football and then just blow Ole Miss off the ball.
Vince.
Yeah, along the same lines as part of what I was going to say, when you play a team really is going to matter this year because teams are going to need to come together and change and evolve as the season goes on. I also think even though Alabama looked really good, Georgia looked really good in their own respective halves, and then Alabama made the play at the end, I think you can come out of that game and say, all right, they've got some flaws, Texas got some flaws. Wait, maybe Tennessee has some flaws. This is a thin line between continuing your expectations and what the reality of a week-to-week in this league is.
My lesson was this, and you guys can disagree if you like. Anybody can beat anybody.
Yeah.
Kentucky going to Ole Miss. You already hit the other one. Kentucky opened the season by getting crushed at home by South Carolina. Then they hang with Georgia. Then they go to Ole Miss and shut down an offense that everybody says, oh, you can't shut down Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin. To me, that is a wake-up call for Vol fans out there who are sitting there, and we do it in the media. Okay, they'll beat this team, they'll lose to that team, they'll beat this team. We have no idea, none. We might have a guess, we might be an educated guess, but when they kick that thing off, you know, it's anybody's game. Going back to as if South Carolina 2 years ago wasn't a good enough lesson. You look at Kentucky and Ole Miss. Kentucky with that horrible offense, horrible quarterback play. One hope to hell pass at the end of the game. All of a sudden they're in the end zone. It's like, wait a second. How are they going to pull this off? And you're waiting for them to choke and die. To me, I'm just watching that thinking, I hope Tennessee fans are paying attention. Because if you're sitting there not taking Arkansas seriously, not taking Florida seriously, who always gives you fits, not taking whoever seriously, you need to start taking these teams seriously. In this league, anybody can beat anybody.
People laughed at me this week because I said if Tennessee is conservative, if what they were against NC State and Oklahoma is who Tennessee is, they're going to struggle against Kentucky. Because you're walking into Mark Stoops going to play him playing his game.
Right.
That's the issue Mark Stoops always has with Josh Heupel, and why I just always will put that in ink as a win for Heupel, is you can't go throw the ball 40 times a game when that's not what you do against a Josh Heupel team and go tempo and expect to beat them. You can't throw the ball 20 times, run it 50 times, and expect to beat Kentucky easily.
And I think what we've seen up until this point, too, that aggressive play calling pays off. When Kentucky got a little shy and conservative against Georgia, not going for it on fourth down, that ended up costing them. They had quality fourth down conversions against Ole Miss. That proved to be the difference maker. Alabama lets up in the second half. Here comes Georgia coming back. So I think what's the key here is the best games have the aggressive play calling, and I think that's how you end up causing separation because the top five, the top tier in the SEC, they are so razor thin, so close to each other that you need those aggressive play calls.
And I think it's just another reminder. We do it all the time. We do it. Fans certainly do it. We hear from them. Well, if Arkansas could really beat Auburn, like we're going to crush them.
Transitive property.
Right. You
Doesn't
can't
work,
just look at one result and make grand declarations from it. It's not the reality of college football right
Well,
now.
the situation plays such a role in it. I mean, here's the thing, not to take anything away from what Alabama did last night. They were home underdogs. Let's say that game was in Athens. We get the same score? I don't think so. It doesn't mean I think Georgia wins. I just don't think you see that kind of a start from Alabama. If they're going to Athens, I don't think they're rolling to a 28-0 lead. It's where you're playing. I think they were really helped by the fact they're home underdogs. Those kind of things play a role in it, and I think fans need to pay attention because it can bite you in the butt. I also think, Ryan, the NFL, we look at it and it's like the talent is so equal at that league where if you take one or two players off this team, put them on the other team wins. I mean, it's that razor thin. Switch Trevor Lawrence and Patrick Mahomes. I'm putting my money on the Jaguars if they play the Chiefs, just because of one guy. When you look at the SEC now, where all the talent, and you cover it, we're going to talk recruiting with you later, all the talent's gathered down here, tons of it. Is it getting that way in the SEC, or am I overblowing it? I just think you're closer to the NFL than you are in any other conference.
It's getting that way, and this is what if you remember when we discussed NIL a few years ago, I thought it was trending this way, that it was going to be on a small scale what the NFL is, where 25 teams are good enough to compete for a championship, and it was 10 or 12 maybe just a few years ago. So I think we're already seeing a little bit of that. It's going to get even more that way though, I think. And to your point, I think the top tier is still a little separated. That doesn't mean upsets don't happen. Yeah. The top 4 or so look better than the rest, but between 5 and 14 in this league, it's very even. And one player being out can swing a game. So those injury reports each week, they really matter.
They matter now, yeah. And I think that, you're right. Some of those look like they're separating, but before yesterday, I think most people would have had Ole Miss in that separate group, and they lose to Kentucky. Missouri isn't as good as I think a lot of people expected coming in. Some of us said we expected them to drop back. Their schedule's so bad they may keep a good record. But they have to go to overtime to beat Vanderbilt. So if you're sitting there, well, the bottom can't beat the top, they can take them to overtime. So I think what I've learned so far is get ready for the chaos. I don't think this is going to go to chalk this year. I think you're going to see a lot of teams beating each other up. We'll see if I'm right or wrong. We've had this discussion since the summer. Because you think the cream's going to rise and get into the playoffs.
I think just a bunch of 10-2 teams is what you're going to end up with. That's my concern for the SEC. And then how does the playoff committee decide who's going to the playoff from the SEC?
And I agree. If you're saying there's a bunch of 10-2 teams, I don't know that I completely disagree at this point. But I don't think you're going to have like 12-0 teams.
Yeah.
There are people like, well, they'll only lose one game. Well, nobody's going to beat Texas. I think all these teams could walk around with 2 losses by year's end. I think they're going to beat each other up, but we'll see.
You can't write people off with 1 loss.
Right, not anymore.
And so teams will bounce back from a loss.
Now, on an interesting point, I will say this. The Ole Miss situation, we got to get a break, but the Ole Miss situation is interesting because their SEC schedule, on paper, it doesn't look tough, and they played absolutely trash going into their conference schedules, their non-conference. If they lose 2 games, I don't know that they're getting in with their schedule strength. They may have to run the table from here on out.
But teams like LSU and A&M, maybe they're still in the conversation even though they took early losses.
But they played tougher teams early that may count them. Yeah, okay. All right, when we come back, we'll show you who we see making the playoffs from the SEC. Everybody's going to show you their rankings. Well, I'm not because we don't have time. And I don't want to go on the record. But we'll do that. Come on back on the Sports Horse. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. 4 generations, great-grandfather, grandfather, father, now children. There aren't many companies in the United States that last that long, much less thrive for that long. 100 years, 4 generations. A.G. Hines Company is one of the rare ones because the Hines family is dedicated to providing you the absolute best building materials for your building project. If you've got a do-it-yourself project at home, get to A.G. Hines Company, start it with them, and they can answer your questions, and they got all the tools and building materials you can use. A.G. Hines Company. All right, let's welcome in the next member of the panel, right down there, Tyler Ivins. Tyler, thanks for being here.
Appreciate it, John.
Appreciate it. All right. We have a poll question today, so let's go ahead and put this thing up. What are your feelings about Arkansas next week? Oh, look at this. People have already been online. The majority of you so far saying a very dangerous game. The second option, close, but a Vols win. The third option, Vols by 2 touchdowns. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to use the little QR code right beneath Hearthside Bank. Our poll is always in reach, just as they are. You get the QR code on your phone, or you can go to sportsource.tv/polls and vote that way. Please vote. I want to see how these things turn out. I'm always interested in how you view things. All right, let's take a look at the SEC standings. And I am just going to open this thing up. You see, I mean, with the exception of Ole Miss being down there, they're 0-1. It's pretty early in the season to be thinking about them at the bottom of the league. But if you looked at it before the season, the haves are on the have side and the have-nots are on the have-not side, I think. What I want to do is looking at those teams there. I wanted the fans to have an idea of who's where on the standings. I want to ask you folks, each of you, to tell me who makes the playoff from the SEC. All right? And I've got you to write them down and rank them. And you're going to tell me 1 through 4 or 5. If you think 5 SEC teams get in, then show me 5. But let's go ahead and show everybody back here. All right. Tyler, I'll start with you. So we need to get the camera in on Tyler so we can hold that up and show people what your playoffs are from the SEC.
This is actually a cosign by the gentleman who I just took his seat. I made a joke to him off the air. I was like, why don't you fill this out because you and I will probably be spot on. In the exact same order. I have better handwriting, but in the exact order. Texas, Bama, Georgia, and Tennessee. Beginning of the season, even here on this show when we were still doing summer things when you joined us on Monday. Tennessee's a 10-2 program. They'll beat Oklahoma, and we'll talk about Alabama and Georgia, and they'll only go as their offensive line will take them. This is spot on right now. These are your best 4 teams. If there was a 5 spot that I left blank, I will still give Missouri the benefit of the doubt, but you guys already touched on it, the first one.
Schedule.
That schedule, and then Diego Papi almost beat you at home. Yeah, so I say 4 right now. potentially 5, but you even brought it up. Money allocations, I don't know if they get more than 4.
Will, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. I think Bama, Texas, Georgia, and I'm tentatively with Tennessee. Part of it is I think their stuff's just together, and a lot of times you see a team that just has their stuff together win 10 games in the SEC, Missouri last year, Kentucky a few years ago. Tennessee has to get better blocking, and Nico has to be able to throw the football, and Tennessee has to be able to go tempo. You're not going to beat, I don't know, you beat Kentucky if you're going to be a conservative football team. But I do think that there are only going to be 4 that get in. I think Missouri has losses coming somewhere because they're not very good up front. I think that LSU is the other concern that I have is maybe LSU only loses 1 more.
Okay. Ryan, what do you got?
I would agree with a lot of what he just said, but my order's a little bit different. I've got Alabama, and then Texas, and then Georgia, and Tennessee. So same 4 teams. I think Alabama, they had a tough schedule, so this was an important one for them last night. They were a borderline playoff team if they had lost this game. Now that they've won, they're probably in. It's just a matter of can they run the table. But I've got them at number 1, Texas 2. I've got a few more questions about Texas after yesterday. They're cracks there that maybe could be exposed by some teams. We'll see. Georgia, Texas in a few weeks will be really fun. Yeah. And then Georgia's still really good. They're not going anywhere. I was tempted to still have them at 2, but I think they'll probably lose another game, even if it's the SEC championship game.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they've still got Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, teams that, were in the top 10 going into yesterday. Ole Miss won't be, but still, they're going to Oxford, which could be dangerous for them. So the Georgia thing, they can't afford to have those losses start piling up. It's, when you look at 4 teams that were in the top 10 going into yesterday, not a great sign that you lose the first one, but it was on the road. All right, Paige, what do you got?
I think I'm pretty similar with you, if I remember what you said. I have Alabama, Texas, Georgia, and then Tennessee. I put a 5th one in, maybe Ole Miss.
Genius.
I think a lot of us are still kind of thinking about Missouri, but they did not look good against Vanderbilt. And if you have to think about what have you done for me lately, I have to do the eye test, and they did not look good against Vanderbilt in double overtime, even though they squeaked out the win. I do think the top 3 might move around quite a bit just because of the schedules that they have, how good they are. Do you move after a bad win, or do you move after a good loss? Just how will that look? But just after seeing what Alabama did, specifically in the first half against Georgia, I know they kind of let up in the second half. I had to have them in the first place over Texas as they kind of get their footing with Arch Manning at quarterback. And I think, like you said earlier, just tackling and blocking on the offensive line specifically will be huge for Tennessee moving forward.
Yeah, I just wonder, and I wondered this before the season, I still wonder it. We got 4, 4, 4, 5. Do we think the SEC, do we think the panel, the playoff group, the committee is just going to look at this and say, if 5 teams get in, 5 teams get in, or do we think there's some politics at play here? Because it's the SEC and the Big Ten who created this thing.
I think it's their politics, and one reason
I think there's a chance it's 4 and 4 a whole lot of years.
Well, and part of it is Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti went to the committee and said, we want 4 guaranteed spots worth of money. And once you did that, and they said, no, you're only going to get 3. To me, that means if you're guaranteed 3, then maybe you can get 4, but I don't know that they're going to give you 5 if they could put a second ACC or a Big 12 team in.
There it is right there. I think the big thing that we need to factor in is we sat back when we were breaking down each conference going, okay, only 1 from the Big 12, only 1 from the ACC. Oh, Clemson's starting to look like Clemson of old again, and Miami gets scared by Virginia Tech. I think all this between the 4s and the 5s all dictate whether or not the ACC or the Big 12, who, by the way, didn't Utah just lose last night after beating Oklahoma State? And what's Kansas State? Look, the ACC and the Big 12, one of those 2 conferences is going to steal a bid, and that's going to be the difference between 4 or 5 SEC teams getting in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. We're back on time. That was perfect. Quick and excellent, the way I like it. When we come back, considering how NC State and Oklahoma's offense has looked outside of the Tennessee game, has Tennessee's defense really been tested? We're going to say this every week. They're going to beat somebody. I'm going to do the Sunday show and say, man, they're tested. The following Sunday, I'm going to come back and say, I don't know if they're tested. We'll come back and discuss Tennessee's defense on the Sports Source. Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Parkside Cabin Rentals. Folks, we're well on the way to a solid week of rain in East Tennessee, so here's yet another reason to stay at Parkside Rentals. The Smoky Mountains represent higher ground, so you can get out of the flood zones down here. Seriously, the holidays will be here in a blink. You need to book your holiday cabin right now. ParksideCabinRentals.com will show you all of the layouts and floor plans for the many, many, many cabins that they have available to rent. ParksideCabinRentals.com. Okay, take a look at this graphic here. This is where Tennessee ranks nationally going into this weekend, so that was before yesterday's game. Number one per game average, only allowing 176 yards per game. But my question is, are the Vols truly battle tested? And I ask that because let's flip to the next graphic here if we could. All right, you see Oklahoma and NC State. Points per game, rush yards per game, rush yards per attempt. It's all pretty bad. And what I did was I just took the ballpark of the two of them and went and looked at last week's top 133 ranking all the schools. Yeah, in terms of points per game, they're about 80th. Rush yards per game, they're both about 100th, about 115th in rush yards per attempt. Now, granted, Tennessee played a role in that, but they've each played like 4 other games as well, and they look pretty bad on offense. So my question, Vince, has Tennessee's defense, as good as it looks, and I think it is good, has it truly been tested yet?
I don't think so, but that doesn't, to your point, that doesn't mean they're not still elite and they won't stand up to those challenges. The challenge has not come yet. So even Arkansas going into the weekend was 4th in passing in the SEC. People maybe wouldn't think of that just looking at that Auburn game. That will be, I think, the best test. And there's obviously some big boy tests coming up, especially when you see what Alabama and Georgia did. Yeah. But to answer your question, no, they have not been challenged as of yet.
No, not at all.
You guys agree?
Yeah, not at all. They haven't been challenged yet. NC State is a really poorly coached offense, and they don't have a quarterback that can fit that system. They wouldn't change what they needed to work around Grayson McCall. So now,
for people who say, well, McCall's out, they look the same
he was,
with him.
He wasn't very good. They probably need to bench him anyway. At that point, Oklahoma, Brent Venables is a train wreck as far as how he handles the offensive side of the football. I don't think trying to marry Josh Heupel's system and Seth Luttrell's system is working for them offensively whatsoever. But I do agree with Vince. I think Arkansas is going to test you. Bobby Petrino is a good coach. Taylon Green has figured out how to throw the football.
You got a great running back too.
Yesterday, going into those games, Oklahoma ranked dead last in the SEC in offense. NC State ranked dead last in offense in the ACC. The only reason why was because Florida State put up another stinker last night against SMU, and that propelled them. So you're facing the worst offense thus far and the penultimate worst offense in all of the ACC. But to Vince's point, as you pointed out as well, Will, number 4 offense, they're going to test Tennessee. That doesn't take away the flowers of the eliteness.
Right. Yeah.
But have they been tested? To answer your question, they haven't. And I think that first test is going to come against
Arkansas.
Arkansas.
And I'll still give them a ton of credit for going to Oklahoma and winning. I like the fact that they went out there. That's not an easy place to play. I don't care how bad the offense is. I like the way they handled the game. We can say they got too conservative. Personally, I like the fact it's showing me that Josh Heupel says, I can win another way. I looked at Auburn give that game away yesterday, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is why you didn't have Nico back to pass.
There it is.
This is why you were smart not to let Brent Venables dial something up, because as bad as they are on offense, I think he's that sharp on defense. Their defense looks good to me. So I think it's a good win. I still believe in the defense. I just don't know if it's as good as what we've seen so far because of who they've played. I mean, you can still be elite and give up more than 176 yards a game.
They're at least very good, but we won't know if they're elite until you get to Bama, Georgia, because how many elite teams are there in college football right now, right?
And then let's turn that around. So Bama and Georgia's defense is elite. One of them gave up 41, one of them gave up 34. So it's how you define elite. Even your elite defenses now give up points.
They do. Right.
They give up points time or two.
I just want to share this before we get too far removed from it. You just made an excellent point. For anybody out there who said, well, the Oklahoma game, conservative, 25-15. If you want any indication what might have happened had Tennessee continued to push the accelerator, go watch the fourth quarter of yesterday's Auburn-Oklahoma game. That was very eerily similar to what Tennessee was getting baited into, but then they didn't take the bait. That fourth quarter, fantastic point.
Well, I think within what they haven't seen are individual aspects like the running quarterback. They really have not dealt with that till late. Michael Hawkins against Oklahoma.
Right.
They're gonna see that first test against Taylon Green, and then what Jalen Milroe is able to do. That's on another level of. I mean, everyone's gonna have trouble with that. And then the last really good quarterback that Tennessee played was Carson Beck last year. So that's another box to be checked. Again, I'm not saying that Tennessee's not up to the challenge, but it's something still unknown about this year's defense.
Well, and here's the thing about Michael Hawkins. You can't really call him dual threat. He's a one threat. He's a leg threat. He's not a great threat with his arms. You haven't seen a guy who can get yards through the air and get yards with his leg, which you will get at Arkansas.
Right.
You're going to have a guy who can do a little bit of both. And even though we'll talk about the Arkansas game and the matchup and everything later, But I do think that's going to be a better test for you. Now, the interesting thing is, if they go in and shut down Arkansas, do we come back the next week and say, but have they really been tested yet?
85 Bears at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all in. All right. You got something to throw in?
No, I watched every snap of that Auburn-Oklahoma game yesterday, and to your point about him not being a dual threat, Michael Hawkins, there was a point in time where I watched in the fourth quarter, and I'm not too high with the higher lows of lows, where I went, you might want to consider putting Jackson Arnold back in this game.
Yes, I
and
agree.
guess what? He wins that game, and everybody in Oklahoma is like, yeah, it's now time for the new. That team is handcuffed.
The defense won that game.
That pick six, and Auburn wins.
Yeah, it was Jordan Rogers. Are we seeing a star being born? No, you're not.
No, not at all.
No.
Winning's a great deodorant, right? That's what John Madden used to say.
Amazing. All right. When we come back, Nico Iamaleava is still high on the Heisman. Am I jumping in? Nope, that's right. Nico Iamaleava is still high on the Heisman odds list, but is one of his teammates the guy who should be getting the Heisman hype? Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Southeast Termite and Pest Control. As summer gives way to fall and winter, ladybugs, stink bugs, box elder bugs, they're all going to try to get into your home because it's nice and toasty in there for the winter and they don't want to stay outside. So instead of letting them into your home, call Southeast Termite and Pest Control. Get the fall invader treatment. Mine is scheduled for this coming week. You get that now, and that way you don't have these guys getting in now and then thousands of their little babies in your home this spring. And let me tell you, if you've got windowsills covered in ladybugs, it's annoying because you don't want to kill them, but I don't want 10,000 ladybugs in my house. Southeast Termite and Pest Control, they can handle it for you. Hire an assassin to where you don't have to do it. All right, let me remind you of the poll question. Let's put this back up here and see where it's going. It's still people are going with a very dangerous game. That's impressive. Close but a Vols win is second. Is that second? Or am I seeing? No, second is Vols by 2 touchdowns. All right. So close but a Vols win is in the middle. So we got a good debate going there. So go ahead and click. Tell us if you think the Vols are going to win this in a blowout. Go there. If not, tell us it's going to be a tight game, or if you think it's going to be a very, very dangerous game, you can go there as well. There's your NCAA scoring leaders on offense. Ole Miss went into yesterday at 55 points a game. I think that's going to drop a little. And Tennessee's staying pat at 54. When you look at the offense, and let me just say, as we went to break, I said, did I get the T's right? No, I didn't. I jumped ahead of break. So what we're talking about here is the offensive line. You look at that offense, you look at trying to keep that offense going, keep those numbers up, you're not going to average 54 for the year. I know that. But in terms of getting back to what you've been as an offense under Josh Heupel, is this offensive line good enough to do that, Paige?
If you have Lance Hurd and you have John Campbell Jr., they can get you to 10-2. If you don't have both of those guys, I think we're going to see a lot more of what we saw against the Oklahoma defense, where even there were penalties ends up becoming a concern when you don't have those two guys in there. Andre Carrick had a horrible holding penalty that called back a 50-yard completion to Dante Thornton. Nico Iamaleava is very uncomfortable in the pocket because he's not getting the time that he's used to when you have both of those guys in there. Also, you see the 2 sack fumbles that he had in that game against Oklahoma. So I think if you have those 2 starting guys back moving forward and they take a lot of the snaps consistently, I think they can get to 10-2. If you don't have them consistently, I get a little nervous down the stretch because there's always a game that might surprise you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just where I'm at right now.
Carbon copy. She's right. Left to right. If you don't have the starting 5 of Hurd, Carrick, Mays, Spraggins, John Campbell Jr., I've got questions. It went back into my season prediction of, does everybody remember the stretch last year without Cooper Mays? Just how impossible it was to peg where Tennessee was going to play or how they would perform that day. The best 5 offensive linemen are those 5. Dane Davis is okay. Larry Johnson has performed admirably, if you will. But those are your best 5,
let's call it like it is. They played poorly at Oklahoma.
Oh, the last time we saw them in their last challenge, they played
well.
very poorly, and there were
They're
times.
getting NIL. I can be harsh.
No, it's fair. Look, you can talk about them like it's Sunday, even though they play on Saturday. I'm 100% there with you. I'm now having questions about my 10-2 prediction because if Lance Hurd is going to return from an ankle injury soon, then I
Each
need
week.
Okay, right.
Keep hearing that. And the problem with the John Campbell thing is he seems to be a guy at this point who's going to be hurt. He seems like a guy who's missing a lot of time. So I have questions as to whether or not you're going to be able to roll with that starting 5. We're sitting here saying, well, if you've got the starting 5, I don't know that I feel comfortable you're going to have that starting five.
Well, you rolled exactly into what I was going to say to add on to what they said.
It's good producing.
Yeah, it is. We scripted every word out. No, that's not true. Yeah. But how realistic is it that they will have those starting tackles? I agree. If they're there, yes, I think it is good enough for 10-2. But how realistic is that? I think it's tough, especially with Campbell, who's left every game in the first half at some point. Yeah. And then who knows the status of Lance Hurd. There's just a drop-off there. And quarterbacks that are comfortable in the pocket are the ones that are able to dissect defenses and have great success. And I don't think they are, even though the offense, you can mask some offensive line issues. We've seen it. They don't have to be elite. But the health of it is a concern because they're not very deep in that group.
And I know we're kind of focusing on Nico, but when John Campbell Jr. went out and you saw a lot of the shifting on the offensive line against Oklahoma, even their run attack completely changed. Dylan Sampson was not as effective. Then you see Deshaun Bishop, kind of that game being more tailor-made to him because you're not being able to get the gaps that you're used to getting when you got those guys on the edge. Dylan Sampson wasn't as effective, and I think when you don't have a good running game, that changes everything.
The last Tennessee touchdown drive of the first half, I was on the phone with Bob Hodge, and we were talking about the offensive line. I said, well, Sampson's going to have to do it all on his own here, and he did. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was the most Jalen Wright series he has had this year, where he was having to carry guys down the field on his back and create his own yardage, and that's what you're talking about. And I don't know that that's sustainable over the course of an entire season.
Which is funny you say that, and credit to you on the other side of the set. You said this off air, and we've been mentioning it during our afternoon show. This Tennessee offensive line is better at run blocking than they are pass blocking. Yeah. That's why there are times where I've caught myself going, this is really peculiar because we're so used to them excelling in that particular portion of their game. I'm more concerned about the Nico passing game being a step behind because of how poor the tackles have performed with the width of the width of the pocket. They're not creating as much as we should see.
Yeah, and the other thing is quarterbacks can help their offensive line as well. And I don't know how much a guy who started 5 games can help his offensive line. I don't think he's the finished product yet. Obviously, I don't think he isn't the finished product yet. I just wonder if there are things he could be doing to make things a little easier, not in terms of blocking on the outside, but I mean, is there a way that he could be helping with the tempo, that he could be calling out the protections, that he could be aiding the offensive line in what they're doing, that he'll be able to do next year, that he'll be able to do later this year, that he can't do now? Because I think that's just another thing that you're throwing in there. It's like, okay, we had questions on the offensive line. Okay, we've got some injuries on the offensive line. And oh yeah, we got a quarterback who's not used to getting pressure in the pocket. He's not used to anything, really, at 5 games in.
Well, it's a test on this coaching staff, too. Yeah. It's a challenge. Can they create some run game to help that offensive line with the QB? Mm-hmm. I don't think they haven't had many design runs. They did it on the 3rd down to move the chains, to pick up a 1st down, but that's something that they could do to try to help their offensive line. Another thing is, they're going to go up against elite competition, but there's some pretty good defensive lines on teams that they're assumed wins over. One of them is Kentucky, and the other is Arkansas on Saturday. They've played pretty good on the D-line. Kentucky wrecked Ole Miss's offensive line. So those will be challenges within that offensive line, that battle beyond just the team, which could give them trouble and kind of bring the game back a little closer.
I also think maybe a little bit is Nico being better with the pressure, too. Obviously, one of the sacks was on the blind side. The other was just him not being aware of the pressure and blitz coming his way.
The running backs, tight ends, they got to help.
They can help as well. Yeah. All right. When we come back, now we're going to talk about Nico Iamaleava and those Heisman odds. Is there somebody else on the team who should be getting more hype than him? And also, we'll kind of ride off this segment. I wanted to also continue talking about Nico and the fact that is Josh Heupel maybe keeping him in bubble wrap too much. Come on back. Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Madisonville Marine. My goodness, the deals that they have going on right now with Godfrey pontoons, Hurricane deck boats. I mean, here's one. Rebates up to $6,000 on Skeeter boats by September 30th. So you've got till tomorrow. $6,000 rebate on Skeeter bass boats on select models. Suncatcher pontoons up to $5,000 in rebates if purchased by Halloween. G3 fishing boats up to $5,500 in rebates if purchased by Halloween. Madisonville Marine. Folks, they've got the best selection. They got the prices. That's why there's no better place to buy a boat. All right, back with Will and Vince here. Yesterday I saw ESPN put up a list of Heisman Trophy odds, and there in the top 5 nationally was Nico Iamaleava. I think he was at 4th. Now, he's played very well for a guy in his second year. He started 5 games. I think he's done what they've asked of him. I think you're walking around here at 4-0. You're number 4 in the country. I'm not complaining. I thought this is what you would get, a slow start from a guy who's getting his feet wet. Question is, should he be getting all this Heisman hype right now? Because I don't think he's played himself into Heisman conversation in any way, shape, or form. In fact, if there is a guy on this team who has, it's Dylan Sampson, who's on pace for about 1,500 yards this year and 30 touchdowns. I mean, he's done an unbelievable start. To me, it's Sampson that should be getting the hype, not Nico.
But it's a quarterback award right now, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of what it's become. And it's just who's the quarterback on the best team. And Tennessee is one of the best teams. So Tennessee's quarterback is going to get the love. But I agree with you. Statistically, if anyone from Tennessee, and I would argue at this point no one from Tennessee should be getting a lot of Heisman hype. But if anyone is, I would say that it's Dylan Sampson. We've just seen people who have done far more offensively against better competition so far this season. That I would say if you're going to say somebody else is top 5 of the Heisman, Tennessee hasn't faced anyone that's good enough yet. And I would also say they haven't had to be that dynamic offensively.
Right.
But if there's a person, it's Dylan Sampson.
Yeah, Will's right. It is a quarterback award. Sampson also probably won't sustain those levels of
30 touchdowns and 1,500 yards.
yeah. With the level of competition they'll go up to. So, I think people have been impressed. I think Nico has some flash to him that really resonates with people nationally. And if Tennessee continues to win, he's going to stay there, whether he deserves to or not. Now, I don't think he's going to win, and I'm not saying he's never going to win it, but Dylan Sampson has had the more Heisman-worthy season so far, but it is what it is. So, and I know Tennessee fans are like, we don't care.
But we can all see it, right?
It's really just an entree into talking about Sampson's the star of this team so far, not Nico.
Sure.
Yeah, but we could see the potential in Nico,
Absolutely.
right? We see the way he's throwing the ball, and you're like, holy crap.
I think he's accurate. I think he's smart. I think he protects the ball when he's not getting strip sacked. To me, he's done everything that you could want him to do at this point if you go in with a reasonable expectation. If you thought he was going to be Peyton Manning as a senior and his second start, you were crazy to begin with. He was going to look like he was needing some growth. Let me go ahead, Vince, and then I'll get to my point.
No, I was just going to say he is one prolific game on national television away from rising up those ranks.
You're right.
Even if he shouldn't be there right now and Sampson's more worthy, let him put up a big game on a big stage, and he's shooting up the ranks.
Okay, and this is a perfect twist just to the end of this segment. Nico in September, I thought, was kind of what I expected for Nico in September. And on the high end, he delivered what he needed to do. Again, you're walking out of that 4-0. He walked out with a road win at Oklahoma. He went and beat NC State. Like them, don't like them. Those are 2 ranked foes that are already pelts on the wall. Good enough. You're going to need more in October.
Yeah.
He's going to have to grow more. My question, is Josh Heupel wise? Because it does look like he's protecting him a little bit, which only Josh Heupel can know this. We can speculate, though, and fans can talk about it. Is he wise to protect him as he has? Do you start taking off the protective layers now, asking him to do more as you get into October? Or is he sitting there saying, boy, we could run into some dangers. You see those strip sacks? I don't know if we want to do this. Do you think he's played it right to kind of start slowly? And do you think now that you're in October, he begins to open it up a little, or will he continue to try and protect him?
I think he's going to have to add more because you can't win this way against the better teams on your schedule, right? Like you can't win throwing the ball 21 times, running the ball 50 times. Good luck. It's not going to. I don't think you can beat Kentucky playing that way. I don't think you can beat Arkansas.
Do you win at Arkansas doing that?
No, you don't. But you could against NC State, and I thought he would do that against Oklahoma. That he would be ultra conservative because you can. And we've been debating that all week on our show. Did Josh Heupel has it been conservative because he had to or because he can? I think it's because he can, but also it does protect Nico and allows you to give him a little bit more each week so that he doesn't end up costing you a game.
I wonder if he learned a lesson last year. They went in with Joe Milton and tried to do what they did with Hendon Hooker, and Joe Milton couldn't do it.
Yep.
toward the end of the year, they started to finally tweak the offense to fit more of the Joe Milton. I wonder if that changed their thinking in that, okay, we're not just going to jam somebody in here right off the bat and expect them to do what Hendon Hooker did. And therefore, they're soft selling it a little bit as they get him ready.
A number of things. One, I think they knew their limitations of Joe Milton. There were some going in. I do agree they had to dial some back because reality told you the middle of the field and slower decisions, things like that.
Yeah.
So they made adjustments, but knew they were limited. I also think they can win against Arkansas and Kentucky by running a lot more than they did, because it's what you do with those. And if you avoid the turnovers, to me, they win by several scores, in fact. I also think that Nico makes some of those decisions for Josh Heupel. It looks conservative, and we're just basing it off of one game, Oklahoma. I don't think you could say conservative going in prior to that.
Anybody who was expecting, a bunch of 300-yard games, it's been more run first than passing.
300-yard half,
Well, he did.
Look at Chattanooga.
It's Chattanooga. I don't count that.
Yeah.
You're going to schedule it? I'm not going to talk about it. Sorry.
Right. But I think some of it is he's not playing hero ball. And I think so he is.
Just a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's playing into that conservative approach. But I think necessity will cause the coaching staff to change as it goes along when you're in bigger, different situations.
Yeah, very good. Appreciate you guys. When we come back, why don't we talk to Ryan Callahan about recruiting? We'll talk about the Vols had a commitment flipped to Oregon. We'll discuss that. We'll talk about recruiting rankings, biggest prospects still on the board. All that next. Coming back on the Sports Source. Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Daniel Hood Roofing. We've been dealing with rainy day after rainy day after rainy day, floodwaters rising, dams cresting, literally. And some folks are finding leaks in their roofs, and they're finding backed up gutters. If that's you, call Daniel Hood Roofing to fix your problem or replace what's messed up. Check out their website. What you're going to find are dozens and dozens and dozens of testimonials from East Tennesseans like yourself who went with Daniel Hood Roofing and are glad they did. DanielHoodRoofing.com. All right, let's see the final poll results, and I'm going to have to turn on you here so I can look and see them for myself. Very dangerous game wins, 47%. Vols by 2 touchdowns, 35%. What was the other one, 18% there?
18%, yeah.
18% for those of you who think, it'll be close, but Vols win. All right, so very dangerous game. It's not a majority, but it's not over 50%, but you get the gist. What do they call that?
Plurality?
Plurality,
Yeah.
There you go. You see, that's why Ryan Callahan is here. That's why he's with me. All right. The Vols fall to number 7 in the 24/7 rankings. There you see it. And, of course, Ryan covers recruiting with Go Vols 24/7. So this is your mother publication here that has Tennessee dropping to number 7. The reason they dropped to number 7 is they lost a commitment from a lineman in Nevada. Fill us in.
Yeah, well, they actually were number 7 even before that because of some other teams that had moved up.
This is a little thing, but never correct me on that. Go ahead.
But yeah, so Tennessee already had been passed by some other teams. They haven't added a commitment in more than a month.
Yep.
That's a little bit of time for some other teams to make some progress. But they did lose Douglas Utu, top 100 prospect nationally, 4-star offensive lineman from Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman High School. There'd been some signs he had been looking around. He went to USC for a game a couple weeks before. Also went to USC season opener against LSU right there in Las Vegas. So he had looked at USC. That one didn't seem to go anywhere. And then Oregon makes a big push. We saw Tennessee steal Desan Brame away from Oregon. Oregon comes back and takes away Douglas Utu. So clearly Oregon, they've had a good class so far. Not a deep class, but the players they have some real quality. When they've set their sights on someone this year, they've been tough to beat. So not shocking that they're the team that was able to pull off this flip, but one that hurts for Tennessee because Utu, I think, was a guy that could have played early, and offensive line's a big need for the Vols in this class.
I'm going to assume this has a lot to do with Phil Knight's Nike money and NIL. So my question then is this one over, or can you get in a bidding war with Oregon/Nike?
I think it's always hard to assume that Oregon's going to back down in any battle these days. I think there's no reason right now to think Tennessee has a great shot at flipping Utu. Now, will they still have some communication? Maybe there's a relationship there. Sure, anything can happen, but I'd say the odds of a flip here or Tennessee getting back in it pretty slim.
Who else is on Tennessee's list right now in terms of top prospects that they're still chasing?
Yeah, still looking at a few positions they would like to address. Running back, they're still looking at DeJuan Morris in-state, a USC commitment out of Murfreesboro. So still working on getting him on campus, but if they can get him on campus, he's a realistic option maybe. A big-time defensive lineman, Isaiah Campbell, that just decommitted from Clemson less than 2 weeks ago. He's scheduled to take an official visit to Tennessee in a few weeks. Top 50 player nationally. That would be a big deal if Tennessee can get him, and they're very well positioned there. And then still looking for a linebacker. A few possibilities out there. Jaden Perlotti, a USC commitment. Austin Howard out of the Memphis area, a Mississippi State commitment. And maybe Brendan Ains, a Wisconsin commitment out of the mid-state. So a few guys are looking at as they look to add another linebacker potentially to this class.
I don't follow the recruiting rankings constantly, obviously. I thought that they'd dropped to 7 because of that. So it's been a while since I've looked. No offense, but there are millions of fans who do watch that. That's why you've got the rankings up there. Those are the composite rankings, by the way. So for those people who are sitting there going, oh my gosh, we've got to be above 7, what's more likely for this signing class when all's said and done? Tennessee rises above 7th and gets higher. Tennessee falls below 7th and goes lower.
It's a tough call because it really does. I mean, with so few names out there on the board, so few positions to address, there's a chance Tennessee only adds maybe one more player. But if they get a guy like Isaiah Campbell, and again, that looks like a real possibility right now, a top 50 defensive lineman nationally, or player nationally on the defensive line, that's the kind of addition that would maybe give Tennessee a chance to move up. So I'll lean slightly toward moving up that and rankings upgrades. They've got some guys who can move up in the rankings that also could help that final team ranking.
Ryan, I always appreciate you doing that. Thank you very much. When we come back, most folks were against conference realignment. I know I was. I didn't like the loss of tradition, didn't like the loss of regional matchups. But I'm kind of enjoying some of these national matchups that are out of the ordinary. Was realignment as bad as we thought? Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Safety Systems. You know all about Safety Systems, security systems, because they're the best in East Tennessee. But how about their home automation? They can put lights, doors, locks, climate controls, music systems, all in the palm of your hand via your smartphone or your tablet. Call VFL JJ Surlis this week, and his team will get out there and turn your house into a, I guess we used to say 21st century in the 20th century. So turn your house into a 22nd century house. They'll make it flashy and cool. SafetySystems.com. All right, back with Paige, Ryan, Tyler. Most people, myself included, did not like all this realignment and the conference shaking and everything. 1, I like tradition. 2, I don't like losing rivalries. 3, regional leagues giving way to national stuff. Mm-hmm. However, I will say, USC, Michigan, USC, Wisconsin out in Southern Cal, Oklahoma playing at Auburn. Now, I've seen Tennessee at Oklahoma a few years ago, so that one doesn't count in my head. But I'm seeing some games that I don't normally see, and I kind of like it. So my question is, was realignment worth it in the long term for fans, just for viewing purposes? Yay or nay? And I could go either way on this.
Well, even in the immediate short term, there seems to be really good payoff right now. It has created a lot of exciting games. I think the SEC is still coming out on top from the expansion and the teams that they brought in compared to the other conferences in college sports, or specifically in college football. You talked about the Auburn-Oklahoma game that had a lot of exciting plays last night. And I think even if you want to look at the long term or the bigger picture, when you look into other sports like softball or you look at basketball, I think the SEC is still ahead of the curve with the other conferences as well. So short term, long term, I think we're out on top having these conference expansions.
I generally think it's been good so far, but I do think because the SEC's kind of kicked the can down the road on scheduling, we haven't seen the negative impacts yet in terms of what we're going to be watching, because there's still a real chance Tennessee, Alabama drops off the schedule as an every year thing, or Tennessee, Georgia at least. And that's, Tennessee, Florida might not be an annual rivalry anymore. So when that stuff starts happening, I think fans might see it as a negative. For now, you're seeing Michigan, USC. It's new, it's fun.
Yeah.
So no negatives yet. And generally speaking, it's going to be good because the conference races are going to be good now. But I think you're going to lose some games that eventually, over time, will upset people.
Yeah.
Positivity has been outside of the SEC. You brought it up. Wisconsin going to Los Angeles. Usually that only happens January 1 when they're in Pasadena. It had a Rose Bowl feel to it.
Yeah.
USC, Michigan has a Rose Bowl feel to it. Paige took the point 400 feet the other way. This is going to be good. It's going to be even better when college basketball gets here. And I get it. I'm a college hoops guy, and I'm just going to let you know, when you see some of these matchups when Tennessee, who right now is projected to be a 4 seed in bracketology, when they got to go to Austin or whenever Oklahoma's got to go to an Alabama to be able to play that type of defense that Nate Oates likes to go up against, that's when we're really going to be like, this is amazing. But out of the gate, as you already pointed out, Tennessee, Oklahoma, we've recently seen it. Yesterday, Auburn, Oklahoma, okay, that's kind of cool, and it had a big, sexy finish that made everybody go, oh, this is amazing.
See, I just thought, to me, it's just seeing teams play each other. They don't normally play each other
I hear you.
in a new location. To me, that whether that game stunk or not, flipping by for 20 seconds and going, oh, Oklahoma's at Auburn, that's kind of cool. That has more value to me now than I thought it would have, that I'm seeing. The problem is, the flip side is, that's a good one.
Right.
We also this weekend got Rutgers and Washington.
Right. There's also that. Yeah.
Who cares?
I think, again, there's so many people who it's SEC just means more beats their chest. They haven't had that yet. But if you're willing to broaden your expectations, if you will, outside of this conference, the Big Ten has done a very nice job of not, as Ryan put it, kick the can down the road when it comes to conference scheduling. You get 9 of these a year instead of the simple 8 the SEC is going to throw you.
Yeah, I guess I've just never been the kind of fan who I won't watch the other conferences.
No, I hear you.
I love the SEC so much I will not watch the Big Ten. That just seems odd
But what
to
it's
me,
doing, it's a very political season. Why would you watch the SEC when we do 9 of these and they do 8? Come on, Big Ten.
The only weird thing so far has been you had Washington State in a non-conference game early in the season. Stuff like that, where just to keep the rivalry going, you play it when you can.
Well, and you also have had the Big 12 had some of those games scheduled ahead of the season, and they kept them live, but they're not conference games.
Right.
They're conference rivals now, but they play games that didn't count as conferences.
Baylor, Arizona. This isn't a conference game, but they still have to play each other.
That's a little bizarre.
So some of those weird quirks, but it's not like overall negative. And the general consensus, I think, probably is you add games like Michigan, USC, and who cares about the other stuff because we don't watch those teams anyway.
Right.
Yeah, and I think if we keep it in the SEC, and to your point earlier about maybe losing some of these historically traditional games, I think that's where you end up having like the greatest obstacle in expanding the conferences. Is it going to be an 8-game conference, a 9-game conference slate? If you start to lose these historical traditional matchups, that's where you'll see this expansion no longer making sense. Because I know a lot of people, probably really even including myself, I don't like that we got rid of the East and West divisions. You kind of have to just because of location with Texas and Oklahoma coming in on the West. But if you're not having your third Saturday in October, your Tennessee, Florida games, even with Georgia and stuff, I think things start to lessen and they don't mean as much, and then obviously impacting the playoffs.
Well, and you also have to wonder, who is this all for? I mean, is it all, well, it's for the TV viewer, but you're giving up something. If you're the Big Ten, for example, and you're gaining USC, Wisconsin. All right, I'm going to guess that probably did good numbers yesterday. We'll see. But that was cool to see those programs meeting non-January 1st, as you say, cool location. But if you're giving up Wisconsin versus, I don't know, Minnesota, now they're going to keep playing for Bunyan's axe, but Wisconsin, all those teams have played a million times. Wisconsin, Illinois. I don't care. As a national viewer, I don't care. But you know who does care? Illinois and Wisconsin fans.
Right.
So you're basically saying, we don't care about you and your fans. Think about these people who are just soft core viewers. They're not hardcore into you, and we're just trying to get them, and we don't care about you anymore. That's the downside.
And I think really the SEC is the only one that still resembles some type of regional conference. You look at these other conferences, and it really is an east to west coast kind of thing. I could not imagine being a student athlete being in those conferences where you're going from California all the way to like North Carolina for some of the weather
Rutgers,
conference.
Washington.
Exactly. I could not imagine doing that. And sometimes you have to be like, why do people care about this game? Even people who are fans of the conference or of those teams, it's very niche once you start doing that.
And it's cool for the first time around, but imagine being a parent of a Cal player or a Stanford player, and you're going to Florida State for a conference game. And
well, you had Florida State,
Stanford,
SMU last night as a conference
Clemson.
game.
I mean, it's just
Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't game day going to Cal for Miami Cal this weekend?
yeah.
Tons of Miami fans ready to jump that West Coast flight, boys.
Since we do the Saturday kickoff every Saturday here at 11 o'clock on WATE, we shall not mention College Game Day, Tyler. That never gets talked about.
I'm actually on that show, so let's everything I just
All
said.
right, when we come back, we'll look at the Vols' remaining schedule and rank their most dangerous games. Come on back on Sports Source. Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Games and Things. Basketball season's almost here, and you can bring Vol hoops right into your own home with a full-sized arcade-style Pop-A-Shot game, complete with Tennessee branding. Games and Things put one of those in our new Saturday studio, and folks come in there and play that thing every time they come in. We have to shoo them out of the studio. Games and Things. Go in there and ask them about the Pop-A-Shot game. I mean, it's arcade. It's an arcade-sized game. It is really cool. And it's got Tennessee right down the side of it. Games and Things, they can make your home just a pleasure palace where everyone, all your neighbors want to come in and hang out. OurGameRoom.com to learn more. Okay, I didn't do a wipey board segment earlier because now I've got a bigger wipey board. This is what I'm going to do. What we're going to do is you can't see them all right here, but what we're going to do is we're going to rank Tennessee's remaining games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in terms of danger to Tennessee. Which are the most dangerous games? We've got them all up here. You can't see them because they're kind of behind the podium, but we'll put them up there at the top. We're just going to kind of do this like a fantasy draft, so we can do a little arguing if we disagree. Tyler, what's the most dangerous game for Tennessee going forward?
Road games, and you shook the Hornets' nest with the loss in Tuscaloosa last night. It's got to be that showdown in November when you go down to Athens.
Okay. At Georgia, toughest game. Does that mean, Ryan, that Alabama's the second toughest?
No question. Yeah. I think the debate would be whether Alabama's 1 or 2, but I think I agree Georgia's 1 and Bama's 2. Still going to be a very tough game, as Alabama showed last night.
All right, so that leaves us with at Arkansas, Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi State, at Vandy, UTEP. Do it. And that makes me. So
Do it.
I think your next most dangerous game is your next game.
I like it.
I think it's at Arkansas. Mainly, again, it's kind of like the Georgia thing. The difference here being they're on the road. This on the road, that's a concern. Plus, they do have a quarterback who can beat you with his legs and his arm, which you haven't seen so far this year. So there's your 3 toughest games remaining. Now it gets kind of fun here in October. I'm going to guess UTEP and Vandy are going to be, and Mississippi State are saved for last.
Right.
So who are we going next with, Tyler? Kentucky or Florida?
Bring back the barrel.
Oh, okay.
They're better than Florida right now.
I disagree on this one.
They're better than Florida, right?
I would have Florida. I agree. Kentucky's
Is the history thing coming in?
Yes, Kentucky's the better team, but Kentucky does not beat Tennessee at Neyland except for the COVID year, and Florida, the history there is undeniable.
You want to change these for Black? That's going to be his last gig. That's going to be his last day on the job when they beat him.
If they beat UCF.
Yeah.
If Napier loses to UCF, I don't know that he makes it to Knoxville. See, now, Florida, I like your thing because here's the deal. I think Kentucky is a much more challenging team than Florida. However, history tells me they never beat Tennessee. Tennessee is their Florida. And we know Tennessee, we say that somebody's their Florida because Florida gives Tennessee hell every time you play them.
The other thing is this. I think to beat Tennessee, you've got to score points. I don't think Kentucky can score points. Florida's got a young, talented quarterback that maybe on the right day could give you some trouble.
Do you think they're not just going to show up to the picnic like they did in Oxford yesterday and go, you can't touch this ball, and we're running that clock?
I don't think Tennessee can be held to 17 points. I could be wrong.
Do you remember that Florida played keep away from Tennessee last year? Kentucky's going to implement that same style.
I think Heupel's better coach than Kiffin.
Anybody but Georgia probably isn't holding Tennessee to 17.
All right,
I'll concur on that.
who we going next? We got at Georgia, Alabama, at Arkansas, then Kentucky, then Florida, though that's all Tyler because I think Ryan and I might flip that one. This is me, isn't it? So I'm going to go Mississippi State.
Oh, no.
I was going the other way.
It's Vandy.
Yeah.
It's Vandy. I'll go Vandy. Before the season, I said Mississippi State might be a sleeper because I expected anyone that picks up this system, it usually makes a big jump. You saw what it did here. It has not made any kind of impact at Mississippi State. That Jeff Lebby has had zero success down there.
And they have a terrible non-conference loss already.
Yeah. So, I mean, getting their tails kicked at home by Toledo.
Now, I don't think Missouri's great, but Vanderbilt taking Missouri to 2 overtimes shows you you can't sleepwalk through that one. You've got to at least show up and play.
I'm going to assume we're going Mississippi State.
The rest is chalk.
Yeah.
All right. At Mississippi State. And then the only team in Division I worse than Kent State, who you've already played, you get UTEP. So there you go. There it is, Tennessee's danger level. I'll step out of the way. There we go. At Georgia, Alabama at home, at Arkansas is your third most dangerous game. Then Kentucky, Florida, flip those. At Vanderbilt, Mississippi State,
God,
UTEP.
that's gorgeous.
All right, very good. All right, guys, when we come back, I'll throw a pin. Let's talk about the keys to victory. Tennessee heads to Arkansas. What do they got to do in Fayetteville to get the win? And thanks to you two for being here today. I appreciate it. Thank you. The other guys in the panel will be here next. Come on back. Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Express Frame. When you watch our Saturday kickoff show and you see all the memorabilia on the walls, that's 99.9% work done by Express Frame. No one does better work, and it all comes with a lifetime guarantee. Protect your collectibles, photos, magazines, jerseys, and more at Express Frame, the Common Shopping Center, North Peters Road. Maybe that's South Peters Road. You can look it up. Express Frame. All right, take a look here. I just mentioned the Saturday kickoff. Well, there it is. Saturdays at 11 a.m. here on Channel 6. Also, sportsource.tv. Also, our YouTube channel. So you can find it in any of those places, but we prefer if you watch it right here on television. Also, here are the Vols and the Hogs by the numbers. We'll leave this up for a second. I tell you what, I'm going to mess up my director here, but welcome to the Sports Source. Let's go to the next full screen, and then I want to bounce back to that one. Here's a challenge for you. There we go. We'll leave the other one up later or longer. Taylon Green, you see what he's done: 468 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns rushing, 5 touchdowns through the air, 1,236 passing yards. So he's not the most prolific passer in the world, but he's a true dual threat. You haven't seen one yet. Jaquindon Jackson. It's basically he and Dylan Sampson at the top of the SEC rushing list right now. 500 yards rushing. He's already got 9 touchdowns on the season, or 8. I can't see that far. 8 catches for 85 yards as well. And then Andrew Armstrong's their leading receiver. He actually got into it with the line yesterday. Told them to start blocking a little bit better for Mr. Green. Then he left the game a little bit, so I'm not sure what his injury status is. I tried to read up on it last night. Nobody really mentioned it, so I'm assuming he will be a go for Tennessee. Now, let's get back to that previous full screen. Look at that. Way to go. We'll leave that up for a while. The numbers in red, you see anything in green, that's an offensive number. The reddish pink there, that's defensive number. And then the red actual text, that's who's got the strength there. And the interesting things that stood out to me, penalty yards per game, well, Arkansas's got the advantage there, so that could be a problem spot for you. Turnover margin, you've got the advantage there. They've already had 9 turnovers on the year. Sacks, you have the advantage there. They have given up a truckload of sacks so far. Field goals, their kicker has not been very good so far, but they are much better in the red zone. Well, not much better, but they are better than you red zone. We'll leave that up and let you peruse that for a second. Let me ask everyone here, keys to victory, Tennessee and Arkansas. Will West, you can start.
Control the line of scrimmage. That's what it's going to come down to. Sam Pittman's offensive lines. I don't think they have the talent that some other SEC teams do, but they're going to block hard. And you get that from Sam Pittman every time. But it also comes down to when you control the other side of the line of scrimmage, you're setting an edge for Taylon Green, and you're making sure you're being disruptive and try to speed his clock up a little bit. Because he can throw the ball downfield. He couldn't last year at Boise. He can this year.
Yeah, I think it will be keeping Taylon Green uncomfortable. Apply pressure to the quarterback. There was a really pivotal play late in the game against the Aggies. It was a 4th and 1. They ended up converting it to get to the 34, but then a sack, fumble, recovery. The Aggies drain out the clock, and then they win. So what Tennessee's defense needs to do is find those cracks in their offensive line, pressure the quarterback, and when he's pressured, he does not make very timely or smart plays. I think that'll be the difference maker in this game.
This is on paper at least, it looks like it's going to be the first real good test for the secondary, which going into the season we wondered about. We've seen that they're faster, they're more athletic, they tackle better than last year's group. Can they cover? Oklahoma had a pair of really good receivers who one didn't play and one left the game in the first quarter. So you really haven't been tested. You had the one kid from NC State, but Grayson McCall just couldn't get him the ball. And maybe that's Tennessee's plan again. Vince, keys to victory for Tennessee.
Don't let the former Vols that are now starting at Arkansas beat you. Addison Nichols starts at center, then Nico Slaughter starts in the secondary. I'm kidding. That is not one.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, it's a good one.
You can tell you're a producer at heart, though. Just throwing those in there. It's good.
But I think the red zone, you saw that Arkansas was better offensively converting in the red zone. And Taylon Green has had some of his biggest misses in the red zone where it's been wide open receivers in the end zone and then he misses them. But if he's better there, then that could be a tough thing. Tennessee is better defensively. Arkansas has allowed more of those red zone scores. So I think that's going to be a big part of the game is the red zone, both offensively and defensively.
Going to be an interesting matchup. Pittman, you went into this season wondering if he'd be fighting for his job at this point. He's 3-2. The Bobby Petrino factor going against Tennessee's defense is going to be a fun one to watch as well. Paige, Will, Vince, thank you all for being here.
Thanks,
I
John.
appreciate all of you. And I'll see you all for the Saturday show as well. We'll see you for the Saturday show. We'll see you back here with our usual post-game crew next Sunday. And we appreciate you being with us. We appreciate our sponsors. Get out and see them this week. They're the reason we keep coming here every week. See you then.